Hey guys, this is Ray, owner of Double R Diesel. Welcome back to the shop. And behind me, we've got our 2020 Ram 2500 here on the lift. And we're about to get started installing some RevMax goodies. So let me get the camera turned around and let me show you what we got. All right, guys, if you got a Ram 2500 or even a 3500 like I've got with the Cummins in it, there's a good chance that you've got the 68 RFE transmission. These 5th gen trucks, you can't get a manual transmission anymore, so it's either going to be the 68 RFE or the ASIN. If you got the high output engine, then you've got the ASIN. But we're talking about 68 RFEs today, and one of the best things that you can do for your 68 RFE transmission to help it last longer behind the power and the torque that the Cummins offers is to install yourself one of these RevMax billet heavy-duty valve bodies. And you ask why? Well, sum it all up, the longevity of an automatic transmission is to prevent the clutch packs with inside that transmission from slipping under any circumstance. If you ever slip those clutch packs 1 or 2 times, it's pretty much over with. It's toast, and you're going to have to rebuild the transmission. So what holds those clutch packs tight together? That is fluid pressure inside the transmission called line pressure. The pump inside the transmission obviously generates the fluid pressure and volume. The valve body controls how it flows and how much pressure is built up. The factory valve body with factory tuning can only build about 160 psi. It's kind of mechanically limited. Over the years, we've tried tuning stock valve bodies 165, 170 up to 180 psi, and some you can, some you can't. But basically, you're mechanically limited to around 160 psi or so. So in order to get more, which is what you want, the more line pressure that you can build to a certain extent will hold those clutches tighter together when they're applied, reduces the chance of slippage. You got to have a valve body like this, a modified valve body. RevMax has been in the 68 RFE business for years. I trust their parts, trust their service. Their valve bodies, their transmissions, their torque converters, they're all first class. And we've got their billet unit right here, and we're going to get it installed on our 2020 truck. Just say a little word about the 68 RFE. There's a lot of bad rep about the 68 RFE, but the 68 RFE is actually a very good transmission. If you take care of it, it'll take care of you, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to help take care of it by adding this valve body to it. So let's get the truck up in the air and get started. Guys, before we get the truck in the air, I wanted to mention one more thing about the line pressure settings that this valve body is capable of. Like I mentioned, factory is 160 psi. When you go to one of these RevMax billet valve bodies, when we do the tuning, we set the line pressure to 225 psi for the forward gears, and that's a good 65 psi over stock. And when you talk about that much more pressure being applied over the clutch area, that's a lot more holding power. Makes a big difference. Matter of fact, we could go all the way up to 250 psi without worrying about doing any pump modifications. But typically, we set them up for 225 with our tuning. Do recommend getting a custom tune when you install a RevMax valve body, and obviously we can help you with that. Before we raise the truck in the air, one word of caution if you're doing this yourself, always disconnect your ground cables because we are going to be working around electronics. So you got a battery on both sides, disconnect the ground cable on both sides, that way there's no risk of any electrical problems. So do that. Then if you got a lift, get your truck in the air. If you're doing it, on the ground, then you can go to work under the bottom. So we're going to get our truck up in the air next and start draining the transmission fluid out. All right, guys, we got the truck in the air. First thing we got to do is the messy part, and that is to get the fluid out of this transmission. And like most stock transmission pans, there are no old drain plugs to be found. So to get the fluid out of this transmission, you got to loosen the bolts, break the pan loose from the gasket, let it fall down a little bit, and fluid's going to run everywhere, and you just try to capture it the best you can. There's no other way than to get messy, so that's what we're going to do next. Get the fluid draining out of it, let it run a little while, and then we can come back and get the valve body out of it. Alright guys, we got the pan off the transmission, and as you would suspect, it was a little messy, but not too bad. But we're going to let this thing drip a little while before we actually remove the valve body. It's we got to take the filters off the bottom of the transmission. You got two of them. You got your typical strainer type filter here, and you also got a spin-on filter, so make sure you got some replacements for those when you do this job. You know, get you some genuine Mopar parts and replace it with good stuff. But we're going to let it drip a little bit and start removing some stuff, and we'll go from there. Alright guys, we got the sump filter off and the spin-on filter off. You can see them down there in the drain pan. And when you take that spin-on off, it's going to drain a little while. So we're just going to let it sit and drain overnight. That way it's not so messy to work with. And then we'll come back tomorrow and we'll snatch that valve body off there and get everything swapped around. But speaking of that spin-on, that's one of the things that you can get from RevMax is that nut insert there on the factory filter. Maybe you can see it there. I'll show it to you on the table. Is made of plastic, and it's subject to break, and you can get a nice metal insert from RevMax, and you can see it right there. And we're going to get that and use that in conjunction with a new filter there. So, and you can also see the thermostatic bypass. We're going to install that as well. While I've got it right here, I'll just talk about that briefly. It takes the place of the thermostatic distribution block. You can see it right there. Basically what this does is keeps the transmission fluid from going to the cooler until it gets to a certain temperature, and then it allows it to go to the cooler. But you know, as far as these transmissions go, the cooler you can keep that fluid, the better. So this block basically just takes that thermostat out of the equation and allows the fluid to run freely all the time, which is the best thing to do as far as keeping your transmission fluid cool. So again, we're going to let this drain overnight. We'll come back and jump on it again tomorrow.